Cowboys defense has had a major facelift this offseason. Dallas drafted 8 players on the defensive side, including linebacker Micah Parsons. They also signed 7 defensive players as free agents and hired Dan Quinn as their defensive coordinator. So, Greg, have to ask, have all these moves made the Dallas Cowboys legitimate NFC contenders?
They definitely have. When you look at the Dallas Cowboys, there are a couple things that we knew that they were. Offensively, we knew that they could score with anybody and outscore anybody. Defensively, we knew what they were. They were going to give up a ton of points. So what do? Not even getting to the personnel first, you address it right away by bringing in a new defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. A position of where he thrived and he has experience at building a successful defense and getting it to perform at a high level. So I love that start. And then obviously what they were able to do this offseason and then in the draft with Lavar, your guy. So I believe you're not going to be a Dallas Cowboys fan. I know you hate that, but with your guy Parsons being there, I know you're going to be a Dallas Cowboy fan. But you got to think of these two guys, a head coach, and one was just a previous head coach, and Dan Quinn, Mike McCarthy, trying to get that lightning back in the bottle that he had in Green Bay. On the offensive side, he has it rolling. And then you look at defensively what they can potentially be. If this team can be anything close to what they were a couple years ago, this can be a definite contending team in the NFC. It's going to be a challenge. They're going to have to mesh. They got a lot of new pieces and now a lot of new faces. But I believe this scheme that they're going to all be playing fits their personnel a lot better than what we saw on the field and on display last season.
Yeah, as much as I love my baby boy, Stick City, Micah Parsons going to this Dallas team, which now I figure I have to cheer for Dallas in a much larger capacity. Sean Lee was on the team as well. He just retired. Shouts out to Sean Lee for a tremendous and brilliant career. But this is still the same Dallas team that we've been looking at until they show us something differently. They have the same amount of weapons on offense that they had last year, G and Rick. Like, I look at this team and I say, can you bring in a few young guys and in their first year as rookies, can they be a catalyst on a defense that really, really needs to step it up and be at a much higher level? I think that they can make this unit better. I think they can make them more respectable. But to put the weight of the success of this team on Dan Quinn and a young group that they're going to try to mesh together to play well on the defensive side of the ball, I don't necessarily subscribe to that just yet. I look at this offense and I say they are going to have to step up and be more of what they haven't been, all right, which is winners in big games. You have to slay the dragon if you want to be the person that's recognized as, the one. And that's what this offense has to transition and do. The offensive line is getting a little older. You're looking at guys like, can Zeke get it back at this point? Or is it going to have to be Pollard that really carries the load at that position? This is a team that needs to run the ball. When you have those positions at receiver, the skill positions, you have a ton of talent. Maybe Lamb steps into a bigger role as in his sophomore year. But I still look at Dallas as a team that has to show that they can get to that level of where they can be considered a contender in the NFC. I don't know that they're a tremendous contender in the NFC East. Why? Because I don't know what we're going to get out of the New York Giants this year. I really don't. I saw them improve. They were inconsistent, but I saw improvement, which means they could be a better team. We saw a Washington football team find itself at the end of this year and end up winning the division, and that could be foreshadowing of years to come in that division. They need to focus in on the NFC East first and grow that defense so that it can compete and contend. But this offense ultimately has to step up and show that they can win in the big games as well.
Did Skip come up with this segment? Because he's the only person, or maybe the first person I think of, who would actually immediately go to, "We're back, baby." Wait a minute. You're back to what? Can I have a full screen here? Can I remind you? Greg, I hate to ask you so many questions, but I asked you about leverage versus power. Now when you say if they can get back to what they were a few years ago, what is few years? Are you talking about like 25, 30
Yikes.
years? I usually think of a few years being like 2, 3, maybe on the outside. 4 years. Last time they were meaningful was way back when, obviously, as this demonstrates. So no, to Lavar's point, I see them as being playoff contenders if their defense improves because of all the additions. And we see Dak Prescott, he can't live up to the contract, but can he get back to what we saw, some semblance of that? Ezekiel Elliott, can we get some semblance of that? We're just assuming the offense is going to resume what it's able to do with Dak Prescott. A lot of assumptions being made here in terms of where the Cowboys are going to go. And all I've seen for the last 25, 30 years is that all of the optimism has almost always ultimately been dashed. And I see them as improved. I see them as better. I don't see them rising to the top of the NFC.
Rick, that's all we do is assume. We assume that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be right back where they left off. We assume that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be.
I like that assumption.
Exactly. That's what we do. Not all assumptions are liked and loved or agreed upon. And this is one for me. When I talk about them getting back to what they were a couple years ago, it's strictly defensively. A couple of years ago, they were middle of the pack, top 11, 12 in overall defense, in total defense. If they can get back simply just to that, we're not asking them to be a top 10, top 5 defense. We're just asking them to be above average. And so I think that if they can get back to that, yeah, I am going to assume that you paid Dak Prescott a bunch of money to be successful, to be great, to be awesome. And he was doing that before he got injured the season last year. And so you add, like you said, Lavar, a CeeDee Lamb in his second year. You add all these other pieces around. I assume that they are going to be. I expect them to be good on offense. That's not the question. The question is, what are they going to look like defensively?
So you're saying if they're mediocre defensively and they're good offensively, that's going to get them to NFC title contention? I don't see that.
Because of how
the defense is going to have to be spectacular.
And how they can score the ball? Absolutely.
But their defense isn't going to be that bad. I'm just saying
if they can get there.
Well, their defense isn't going to be bad. And let's highlight my guy, Micah Parsons, real quickly, right? Let's take a look at him. Do you know that the Dallas Cowboys do not have one Hall of Fame linebacker? Not one thus far today, with the likes of Hollywood Henderson, Chuck Howley, who was a Super Bowl MVP, Leroy Jordan, if you know your Dallas history, guy that's favorite to me, Ken Norton Jr., Dexter Coakley, and Sean Lee. You have some great linebackers that have played for this team. But this Micah Parsons, he's a different breed of person. He's a different human being, different animal. He's all mammal is what he is. He goes down on all fours if need be. If it's a full moon out, you might catch him howling at it. I mean, he's just one of them type of dudes that he could actually go out and catch what he's going to eat with his teeth. That's how I feel about this guy. So that's what you're going to need to change the personality of this defense. You got Jalen Smith, super ridiculous athlete, can move around real well. You got some guys, DeMarcus Lawrence on the ends. They have a team that could actually, with an attitude adjustment and a belief and a nastiness about them, could actually shift and turn the tide of what they could possibly be. Micah Parsons is that type of catalyst player that could come in and change the entire complexity of what your defense is. And keep in mind, Dan Quinn was a part of that Legion of Boom group. It was a part of some really, really cool defenses that saw the likes of Bobby Wagner and all of those type of guys, KJ Wright. Just some really, really fine football players. I look at this being the type of situation where Dan Quinn with a Micah Parsons turns this into the catalyst of making this a better defense.
I love Micah Parsons, but he's literally going to have to be the werewolf in order for this Cowboys team to elevate itself to the point that you guys are talking about. I just don't see it.
Well, speaking of werewolves, Anthony Davis, he held it down on offense and defense last night. We'll tell you if